something about writing the end that you're just like, oh wow, like I just did that. So then from there, I mean, The Memory Jumper, which is the book that I'm publishing, it was probably maybe my 6th or 7th finished manuscript. I have a bunch of others in various stages of drafts on my computer. But yeah, I just decided, so this story that I ended up writing, it just really spoke to me, and the characters kept kind of haunting me. And so I was like, this is the story that if I do end up getting published, this is my baby. This is the one that I feel like needs to be in the world.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the About Story podcast. My name is Nathan Johnson, and today I'm joined by Amanda Brown.
Hello.
Amanda is a writer and a novelist, and I'm super excited to have you on the show.
Yeah,
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Like I heard you were writing a book, and I was like, I really want to hear about it. I want to hear your process. So thanks again for making the time for this, and yeah, let's jump right in.
Yeah, sounds good.
So tell me a little bit about your journey. Where did you start out?
For sure. So I've always been writing. I don't remember a time when I wasn't, to be totally honest. My grandpa is a writer. My mom is a writer. So it's just honestly, I have the writing gene. So probably my first book that I remember writing is I read a Hans Christian Andersen novel. And actually, I loved the writing and the art. So it's kind of funny, I ended up being a writer and a graphic designer.
Right.
Both of them kind of came together. But yeah, so I was like, this is so cool and I want to do this. So I wrote my own little story and illustrated it on loose leaf paper with a green pen. And I still remember that, and I stapled it together. I was like, Mom, look, I wrote a book. So that was probably like my first adventure into writing. But then my grandparents had pets growing up. And so I would write stories about them. I think it was like Max and Lucy, The Adventures of Max and Lucy. So I think there were like maybe 5 episodes of stories that I wrote. So like every Christmas and Thanksgiving, I would give them to my grandparents and say, here's another installment. So I've always been writing. I have been blogging for like 10 years, started a magazine. I love it. It runs in my blood. Everything I do is about it.
That's really cool. I think it's really cool to have a passion, to do something that you're passionate about.
Oh yeah.
And
absolutely.
then to work on it. Because I think there's some people that just like, they dabble, but they don't actually do it.
Yes.
You know?
And I definitely had to work on that because I used to be a dabbler. Like, I like to do this, and I like to do this, and I like to do this. But my sister is more of a logical person, so she's like, okay, I want to draw. I am going to draw. I'm going to look up classes and, like, set timers to learn how to do this. So I kind of learned from her because you can't live your life as a dabbler all the time.
Right, yeah. You got to make a commitment. You got to choose, yeah. So when was that point for you? Like, was there... when you decided, because I know you wrote your first novel, like what led up to that for you?
Yeah, let's see here. So I think one of my first novels that I wrote, it wasn't this one. This wasn't my first novel that I'd written. I think the first one that I actually finished was a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses. Okay. So clearly I ended up writing a retelling of Rapunzel, so there's clearly a theme going on here. But yeah, I finished it, and I was like, whoa. Finished, as in it was like 30 pages long, but it was a big deal to me. So I was like, wow, I can actually decide to start something and finish it. And there's something about writing the end that you're just like, oh wow, like I just did that. So then from there, I mean, The Memory Jumper, which is the book that I'm publishing, it was probably maybe my 6th or 7th finished manuscript. I have a bunch of others in various stages of drafts on my computer. But yeah, I just decided. So this story that I ended up writing, it just really spoke to me, and the characters kept kind of haunting me. And so I was like, this is the story that if I do end up getting published, this is my baby. This is the one that I feel like needs to be in the world. No. So that's the one that I continued polishing and editing and pushing to be published.
That's fantastic. So what was a little bit of the inspiration behind the story? Yeah,
so The Memory Jumper is a retelling of Rapunzel. I originally just wrote it as, I want to write like a retelling of Rapunzel. And I had this idea. I like riffing off of the story. So I thought, hey, what if instead of being above ground in a tower, right, like the classic story in the Disney version, what if she was underground? And it was a bit more of a darker fairy tale because just being underground naturally, I feel like there's like darkness, and then the character, the evil antagonist, ended up taking on a life of her own, and it ended up being an even darker story than I'd figured it would be. So I thought, hey, let's just go with this and see where it goes. And the character just kind of took on a life of their own, and it ended up being a much more powerful story than just being, oh, it's a retelling of a princess, you know. It ended up having a lot more powerful themes of like dealing with emotional abuse and dealing with like deciding, hey, if I feel like something isn't right, I can speak up and I can say, hey, I don't like this, and I can take control of my own life.
Wow, that's so powerful. Yeah.
Versus I was like, it went in a different direction from Tangled.
Oh, that's great. What's your process like when you're actually writing it? So do you like write a page a day? Do you like outline it first? Do you like what do you...
Yeah, I'm definitely the classic artist. The artist in me is constantly fighting with like the more logical person inside of me. So I'm like, I don't want boundaries. I want to be a free spirit with my hair blowing in the wind, riding off to the sunset. You know, so it's hard for me to say no. Every single day I'm going to do something, because the rebel inside of me says, no, I hate that. I don't want to. I want to decide what I want to do. So for The Memory Jumper, I started writing it in 2017. Okay. And I honestly, I feel like I blacked out during the entire time. I don't remember much about it. I think I would, because I was homeschooled. And so I was in high school, and I just...
one of those homeschoolers.
Yes. Sorry, I'm not one of the weird ones, though. So there is hope.
I was homeschooled as well.
Aha!
So, yeah, fellow homeschooled.
Everything makes sense now.
Oh.
Yeah, but so with homeschooling, I feel like I got done a little bit earlier, maybe than most kids would, and then you didn't have to deal with, you know, riding the bus, coming home, whatever. So after school, I would just sit down and write. And I mean, it really is like the characters took control, and I would, you know, be in school and I'd be like, oh my goodness, I thought of this plot point. I have to write it down. I have to, like, it just kind of wrote itself, I feel like. So that was really helpful. And I had a lot more time back then. So I think my writing process would definitely change now. It would have to be more strategic and structured. Yes. But yeah, it was honestly a wild indie type kind of, hey, let's write, why not? So I don't recommend it.
How did you develop your characters in the story?
Yeah, so the first one, her name is Adelaide. She's the main character, and she's 18 years old. She's just scared of absolutely everything, and she feels like she doesn't have a voice. The antagonist is always telling her what to do, and she says, okay, I can't stand up for myself. So she was kind of like a really unhealthy version of maybe like a me, because I'm very aware of my own faults. I like psychology and stuff, and so I really wanted to delve into that, like what an unhealthy, if you guys are fans of Myers-Briggs, INFP, but I wanted to delve into what that was like, and Adelaide just kind of took on her own form. The antagonist's name is Fawn, and she as well, I was doing lots of research, and one fascinating thing I found is that your villains need to have a motivation, right? That's why a lot of the original Disney movies, people make fun of them, because the Wicked Witch in Snow White is one-dimensional. Like, why is she, what, because she wants to be pretty? That's not deep enough. So for Fawn, I decided, no, I want her to be a character that you can almost kind of relate with. Yeah. And because a strong villain is someone that you say, hey, you know what, I can see how I could have made that choice too and become just like her. So I really tried to craft her well and give her a very obvious motive for everything she does and make the character almost want to favor her and feel for her. And then there's the character that ends up coming to Adelaide's life and saying, hey, no, you do have a choice. His name is Mason. And it's kind of like the classic Rapunzel where he accidentally happens on the tower or whatever. He isn't as much a person as he is an idea, because I wanted to sell the idea that in life sometimes maybe you're scared to do something and there will be a person or there will be a circumstance or just you're sitting on your couch one day and you have this revelation. And that's the thing that it takes for you to get outside of your comfort zone and to change your life. And so Mason represents that. He just kind of took the form of the guys in my life that had kind of been that for me, like my friends, even my girlfriends, just those people that were like, hey, you should do what you want to do. Don't always be afraid of failure. Just go for it. So yeah, all the characters just kind of came to me. That's always nice.
Yeah, that is nice. And I think it's cool that you base them off real people too, because I think that helps to add an element of realism to it. Obviously, you can make up characters for sure, but I think every character has some bits of real people in them, and that's what makes them believable and makes them real.
Yes. I like to take notes. A lot of people at my workplace are characters. So I'm taking notes on all of them. I'm like, you are going to be a character and you are going to be characters. So watch your step.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. What are some of the, I guess maybe some of the stories or books that inspired you? Obviously, if there's some fairy tales.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But
fairy tales have always inspired me. I don't know what it is about it, but I do love the fantasy genre, and just world building terrifies me. But I think it's good to do things that scare you sometimes. Actually, there's a book called, the author is Jenny B. Jones. It was like the first young adult book that I read. I was so excited. I remember getting it because I was like, oh, I'm not even 13 and I'm reading a young adult book. I'm so edgy. So I picked it up, and just the way she wrote, I was dying laughing. And I was like, I want to be a writer that writes things and it brings in emotion from someone. Like, how cool is that? That's something that you wrote can make someone laugh or cry. I read The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck, and I physically was hungry because she did such a good job of talking about how the characters were starving. I want to do that. There's been a lot of books that have really just spoken to me, but I guess that general, I want people to feel emotion. And the books in my life that have brought me these emotions are the ones that have kind of grown me as a person.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think it's really cool when you can have a story that is deeper than just for fun.
Yes.
So it's like you're reading it. Obviously, it's a fiction.
Right.
It's a novel. It's like
it's enjoyable.
You want to enjoy it,
yeah.
But for it to have a deeper message, and for it to have some emotional or just where it reaches you, like that's so powerful.
Oh yeah,
so powerful.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's great that you really tapped into that.
I remember in English class when my teacher, maybe it was 6th grade, when you learned that a book has a meaning, and I was like, oh no. It's like, really? So every book I'm reading is like selling me a message? Whoa, that changed the way. I never had thought. I thought, oh, this is just entertainment. Okay.
So much
wild.
Yeah.
I know.
I want to talk to you a bit about like writer's block, because that's something that writers often struggle with. In order to complete a novel, like that's a big undertaking to do.
Yes.
And I'm sure you happened across writer's block
yes.
while you're working on it.
No, absolutely.
How did you overcome?
Yeah, so I think something cool about this is that I'm also, in addition to being an author, I'm a graphic designer. So of course you also deal with creative block. So something that I've learned, I'm reading a book called Bird by Bird by Annie Lamott right now. I really recommend it. It's on writing and life. And what she was saying is basically what I've learned in both the principles that I practice. It's that you have to set aside the inner critic in your mind, right? Because usually when you have writer's block, it's just like, it's not that you don't have words necessarily. It's just that you might not have good words, because we always have something to say, right? So I feel like if you're struggling with writer's block, I would suggest give yourself a setting or a scene, and if you want to bring your characters into it, so say I'm writing about Adelaide in my novel, and I'm just like, I can't think of anything to say. Let me set this aside and let me write a little diary entry in Fawn's life. What would happen if one day she doesn't get the groceries delivered? So I'm just going to set my project aside and just start writing. I think the most important thing is to just keep writing, because something that you write, even if it doesn't even have to do with your book or the topic that you're talking about, it's going to, break down that dam that's keeping all of that water of good ideas back. So I would say just come up with some kind of creative idea. Annie Lamott suggests maybe thinking about your childhood and just starting from your childhood and just writing. And maybe one of those things that you write, you're like, oh my goodness, I forgot about this thing that happened to me, and that emotion that I felt, when my parent lost me in the grocery store. That's what I needed to put in my book to continue on, that like sense of fear, and maybe she can get lost and blah, blah. It'll just lead to ideas. So I say, if you ever have a creative block, just do whatever that is. Even in design, I do this. If I don't, I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna go. Even though I think I have nothing, I know I have something. So something always starts with nothing.
I like that.
Even bad something.
I like that. Do you have like a particular place that you like to write, or do you have? Because there's some writers that they have their little
yes,
writing place.
Right,
like,
their
how do
little
you
writing nook.
like how do you get into the zone? Like get into your creative zone?
Yeah. So back home, it was just always my desk in my room. I had a room to myself, hot pink walls, hated it. I wanted them to be white for so long, but it never happened. So I would just sit at my desk and write. But I always dreamed of one day, being like a single writer in a big city. And I just go to a coffee shop in the morning. I just write for hours. So I actually got to live out that dream a couple months ago. So I would go to my local coffee shop and just sit there and write. So ideally, yes, I'm the typical writer who's like, coffee shop. But I love the aesthetic of it. Yeah, so if I could choose, it would be a coffee shop.
It's good to know what you like and know what works for you.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the deal that you got for the book. So you're publishing it. Like, how did the publishing process work for you?
Yes. So I was the type of person, I've been researching this for a long time. The whole publication world is so fascinating. And I had decided I wanted to be traditionally published, but it is hard.
Yeah.
It is so hard, and honestly, I feel like it's kind of parallel to social media. There's just too many manuscripts from a lot of good people, but it's clogged.
Yeah.
So when I've been following Lost Island Press, my publisher, for a while. It's run by a girl named Mel. She's like in her 20s, total girl boss. Hate to use that word, but she's the girl boss. I've been following her, and they have a writing contest every year-ish, and that's how they get their authors. And so it came up, and because they're traditional publishing, they're just a smaller publishing house. So I thought, hey, Mel kind of reminds me of me. Like, she just has a lot of projects going on all at the same time. And so I was like, that would be so cool to support this girl and maybe be a part of, like, in 20 years, she could be a giant publishing house. And I did like that she was smaller. The royalties are better. That's a big plus. They do the marketing for you and everything. So it's very legit. So I prayed about it a little because, with a book, it's hard to let it go because you always feel like you could be fixing it up. So I prayed about it, and I was like, okay, I think this is time for me to submit it. So I submitted it to the contest. I got in the finalists, and then even down, and then I ended up being one of the 2 winners. So that was absolutely amazing for me. And I just love that I'm also supporting, a fellow peer in her publication house journey. So
yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So did they have any input in like the editing of the novel? Like after they decided to pick it up, did they make suggestions for you or like how did that work?
Yeah. So I gave them the book, of course, and then they did like, highlight things and say, hey, we want this change in this. I'm really grateful for them. They were very open-minded about everything. They said, hey, every single edit that we make, if you don't agree, please let us know. We'll talk about it. Of course, it was nice to have other eyes on it because I've been looking at this thing for, 5-6 years at this point. Right. They were very open. I like using run-on sentences sometimes, but I do it on purpose, using commas where there shouldn't be or whatever, but I do it for a purpose. And, they were flagging all of them. I'm like, I promise I know how to punctuate.
I know what a period is.
Exactly, yes. I'm like, I'm just doing it because I think, like, it's a very internalized book. And so I want it to be like, in your mind, when you're thinking, sometimes it is absolutely crazy. And there wouldn't be any punctuation. So I really wanted to sell that. And so I told Mel, I was like, hey, I want to fight for this punctuation. And she was like, you know what? Yeah, I get it. And they let me keep all the weird punctuation. So
that's
grateful.
Yeah. You talked about the royalties. How does that play into it?
So the royalties, I think it's like a traditional publisher would take a lot. I'm blanking on how much. I think it's usually like 50%. Yeah, 50, okay. Yeah. So for Lost Island, it's like a lot lower than that. And I think it's just because the nature of them, they are smaller. So I know for me, it's never been about the money. That's just like a big added bonus to me. But when I saw that too, I was like, oh, there's just even a safety in it, that like I just feel like they don't half or 60% own my book. It still feels like it's mine.
Are you working on anything else currently, like for your next book? Or?
Yeah, I do have an idea in mind. Basically, I want to write a book about how I feel like we live in a world that doesn't want to fail. I don't know. I had some health problems a couple of years ago, and it was kind of stressful because I feel like everywhere I turn, people are like, if you have health problems, it's up to you to figure it out. And if you're still sick, it's your fault because there's some 10-step program that you could do. There's some, podcast that you could be listening to. There's some, and it was so stressful to me. So then when I wasn't getting better, I just felt like it was my own fault. And so I feel like my graphic design teacher had also talked about this, where we had a class where we were doing calligraphy. And by the second day, everyone was like, oh, I hate this. This is the worst. He's like, okay, everybody put your pens down right now. So he put them down, and he was like, you guys understand that you're not supposed to be good at this on the second date, right? He's like, there's monks that spent 40, 50, 60 years of their lives working on this, and you're comparing yours to theirs. So I just want to write a book about how it's okay to fail, and that is part of the process of succeeding. So basically, I want it to be about like, there's a 2-class system where the rich can basically purchase skills and they don't have to try. They just automatically have a skill. Basically, the concept of learning doesn't exist, so they can only do base level skills. And so throughout the book, the girl discovers, oh my goodness, I can play the piano if I just put in time and effort and engage in learning. So I have an outline, but I don't like it. It's a hot mess, but maybe one day.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I think it's cool how you develop your ideas though for your stories, where you have like a certain sort of theme or message.
Yes.
And that seems to kind of guide the structure for the story.
I think heart, of course, is probably, it's the most important part of the story. And that's meant a lot to me because at the end of the day, I want my books to be impactful and I want my life to be impactful. Even if people don't remember me, I want them to remember like the lessons that they might have learned from me or just like I made an impact, right? So that's what I want my books to do too.
That's great. So good. What's some of the best advice that you've heard? Maybe concerning, it can be concerning writing or storytelling or just maybe general life advice too.
I don't want to repeat myself necessarily, but I think villains get overlooked so much in stories. So I think learning to develop a good villain.
Are there any villains that you like? Some of your favorite villains?
Ooh, that's a good villain. Honestly, one of my favorite movies is Maleficent, which they totally redid and ended up kind of making her a hero. But I do love that they revisited the character Maleficent because originally she has really no reason beyond that she wasn't invited to a party to like curse this baby. So I love that they revisited it and gave her a larger backstory. And then you're like, oh, wow, King Stefan treated her absolutely terrible. Right. Okay, I get it now. So Maleficent's one of my favorite villains. I love funny villains. If villains are funny, they get me every time. I'm like, okay, I might have been one of your henchmen. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I do love a good villain, I must say.
That's good. Yeah. I think it's interesting, too, with the dynamics between your villain and your hero, because a lot of times you want to have a contrast.
Yes.
So either and I think it's cool also when, obviously it depends on the kind of story you're telling, but if it's very like thematically heavy, I think it's interesting where the hero actually can learn something from the villain about himself. So it's like the villain is someone who's going to be either critiquing the hero or like questioning the hero's motives or their... I think of something like Batman, you know, like with Batman and the Joker. Right. Where the Joker's constantly like testing Batman. And that's what makes their relationship so powerful is because he's questioning Batman. He's like pushing him to the limit. Like, what do you believe? He's
actually a good mentor.
Yeah, right?
Actually.
Yeah, so I think that's really cool when you can have that balance between your hero and your villain play out like that.
For sure. I think it's called Go Teen Writers.
Okay.
That was like my writing Bible growing up. I still have it back in my apartment. It's dog-eared, but it goes so in depth about, you know, the entire writing process and then the publication process, which I don't know. It was written back in the 2000s, so maybe it's different now. But I mean, Go Teen Writers, I definitely recommend that, especially for your younger audience. I think there's like The Magic of Writing by Gail Carson Levine, who wrote Ella Enchanted. Love Ella Enchanted. So that was also a really good book for me. Abby Emmons is really good. She has a YouTube channel. And she dives into 3-act structures. She watches Pride and Prejudice and breaks down like the denouement. And here's the climax and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, how to write a good villain. I mean, and everything's free. So Abby Emmons is a really good resource too.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. I actually really like Pride and Prejudice a lot. That's a good example.
Yes.
I think that's
Love Jane Austen.
Yeah. It's a great... And I'm not really into like chick flicks, you know.
Right.
But like
Pride and Prejudice, come on.
Like, it's solid.
So good.
Yeah.
Well, I love that Jane Austen is so tongue-in-cheek too. Like she's so witty. So
yeah,
definitely.
And even the political commentary about the time, that's the way the relationships between men and women, social economic structures. Like she was very in tune to the time period.
Yes.
And commenting on the time period, but not like in a bashing you over the head sort of way.
Right. And the things about Jane Austen is that what she's writing can be applied even nowadays, right?
It's very relevant.
That's why I was watching, there's a new movie out on Netflix, and I was watching some commentaries about it, and they were like, the thing that everyone loves about Jane Austen is that what she's writing about, you can relate to in any time of, like, any year. So timeless writing is really important.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Does anyone else in your family write?
My mom does. She doesn't think, I'll read her stuff. I'm like, Mom, this is so good. You should write a blog. And she's like, no. I'm like, I clearly got my writing from someone. My grandpa writes beautifully. I mean, it's prose practically. I feel like all my siblings have dabbled in writing somewhat. I think they're a little scared maybe too, because they're like, well, Amanda's written a book and she's just like always writing. But I feel like they all, it kind of flows in their blood. But I'm definitely the one that's like really stabbed it.
Who do you have critique your work?
Of course, my mom. Everyone sends it to their mom. My mom's actually pretty harsh though. It's not like, oh yeah, my mom loved this. I'm like, no, my mom hated this, but it's fine. No, she's honest. So she's really good. I have some friends who are just so supportive. It was amazing. I worked at a camp, and my campers were like, we want to read your book. So I would send it to them, and they would give me critique. Honestly, it's just like a good grouping of friends, and then anyone else that I happen to mention, they're like, oh, I'll read it. And then if they do, then that's really helpful. I know now I'm involved in more like possible beta reading groups, so you can get like a larger swath of people that don't know you and won't feel bad if they totally like beat you over the head with what they think. But a lot of my friends are honest, so grateful for that.
That's good. How do you take the criticism? Like you know, because sometimes I think it depends on what it is, but sometimes people will say, oh, well, I don't like this character, I don't like this. And you have to decide, okay, well, is it just them? If there's this person, they just don't like this? Or like, you know, how do you filter the critiques that you get?
I have my writing teacher from back in high school look at my work too. So something that she says, I will weigh it very heavily, because she knows like story writing, and if she says, hey, this character isn't adding to the story, I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure what she's saying is true. Then like regarding my friends, if multiple people are saying I don't like him, or like this does not make any sense, then I'll take that critique into mind too. Separating myself from my writing has been really helpful in a way, and that's actually something I've learned from design. We do like a every other week critique, so I feel like that's helped me to kind of detach myself from my work. What I create isn't necessarily me. I can detach myself and just use the comments to make what I'm doing better. So I take that with my writing too. Of course, it's always going to hurt when someone doesn't like your art or your writing, but you also want it to be the best it can be, right?
Yeah.
So if everyone's saying, yeah, don't like that, then okay, I'll close my eyes, cry a little because I liked it. I'll save it in another file called like, Amanda, this was good, but no one liked it, docs or whatever. Save it for a rainy day, and then I'll go back. And it doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, that's fun.
I just have like this whole document, like scenes I liked that no one else did.
Yeah. Sad face.
Yeah.
No, I think it's good though. I think it's good to be open to criticism, because you know we're just one person,
right?
You know, and sometimes you're so in the weeds and you're so invested in it that it's hard to see from the outside. And to you, it looks great, and it's like this is amazing, I love it. And then, but it's hard to step out and see it from the outside, because that happens to me sometimes, where it's like I've been working on something for so long, and it makes sense to me. Sometimes, like with what a character does or whatever, but part of that is just because I know the character already.
Exactly.
You know, it's like, okay, I know this character,
right.
And this is what they would do.
You don't know them like I know them.
Right. But from the outside, they don't have the insight into, so it might not come across the same way to them.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a balance, I think, between taking criticism
and I know from my design, sometimes I'll be like, oh, this is my baby, I love this so much. Everyone's like, that looks awful. I'm like, no, it doesn't. I'll come back the next day, I'm like, I open the document, I'm like, oh, burn this from no. I'm like, you guys were right, I'm so sorry. So like even applying that now, I'm like, okay, yeah, sometimes I do need to take a break, because I'm like too invested in this.
Yeah.
Can't think clearly.
A little blind. But, you know, it happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
This writing group that you're a part of, you said it's called a beta group. What does that mean?
Yeah.
I haven't actually heard that term before.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So there's a ton on Facebook. I'm in a lot of them, and I get the notifications, and there's just so many. So if I'm remembering correctly, basically a beta reader is an initial reader, and they're just reading it for story. So you'll have a group of people. It can be friends. It can be strangers. Like, it's really easy to get involved in these groups on Facebook. But they'll just read it, strangers, and they'll give you, hey, what are you looking for? And you'll say, hey, I want you to read for story, blah, 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 blah. Usually beta readers are more like big idea type people. They're not the like line editors or whatever.
Right.
And they'll give you, the critique that you're looking for, which is really helpful in getting those outside perspectives.
That's good. Yeah, I didn't look into that. So when you're working on your story, do you usually come up with your plot first or your characters first?
I would have to say plot.
Okay.
Like, especially with this upcoming novel, that's kind of why I'm scared, because I know what the plot is going to be, but as far as the people who are going to be driving the plot, I have no idea. And it's honestly a little, because I don't want to write a character that's just like me. I think that's easy to do, but I'm like, no, I really want to challenge myself. So, and I'm trying to honestly decide if I should, because I'm very much a pantster. Have you heard of those terms? No? Okay. Pantster versus plotters. Pantsters are people who just sit down and write. And I tend to be like that, which is fine, whatever. But plotters are people who say, no, I'm going to write out the outline first. I'm going to, do character, descriptions. I'm going to do this and this. And then armed with my, group of papers, I will write this book. It's a lot more sense. But, I don't really tend to do that. So I'm more of a pantster. So when it comes to this book, now I'm like, I almost feel like I kind of need to convert to being a plotter, because I feel like these characters deserve to be thought out a little instead of me just being like, all right, come to me, with this blank piece of paper. So I guess we'll figure that out.
Maybe you could find a way to do a little bit of both.
Yes.
Because I know I do that sometimes where you just get like the first draft out and it's like, ugh.
Yes, it's bad.
Yeah, and maybe some parts of it are good, It's not always bad. But then you kind of go and say, okay, if these are like the pieces that you're working with.
Yes.
It's almost like taking like a box of Legos and like dumping them all out.
Yes,
on the
it's
table.
like, what do I have?
What do I have? Okay, now I can start building stuff.
Yes.
And you kind of see what you have. So yeah, that might be a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to need to be a little in the middle.
Yeah, and get structure. Because also that depends on like how much you want to do rewrites as well. So do you normally do a lot of rewriting? Like when you do you finish like, I don't know, like do you finish like a chapter and then rewrite the chapter, or do you try to finish your whole book first and then you go back through and rewrite? See what's working, what's not working. That's a good question. I'm pretty sure for the Memory Jumper, and what I'll do for this book is I'm trying to detach myself from my inner critic and just be like, okay, just write anything. Even if I'm writing, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is terrible. It's like, it's okay. Just because the first draft is to get something out to create a second draft. Right. That's all that you're doing, like you said, with the Legos. So I'm going to try to just write and not worry about the going back and editing. Now, sometimes, like maybe I'm reading another book, I'm like, ooh, I could write really flowery description based on this. Let me go back. So maybe I'll go back and just give myself like a little bit of what I had wanted by writing out that piece that I thought of. But besides that, I really just want to like plow through and get something out. Yeah. Or else I'm just going to be like going backwards and editing for forever. Yeah. I'm kind of the same way, because you can get stuck if you get into a rut where you're just like going over the same sentence over and over, and it's like it could be a little bit better, or it could be, but then you don't know like what direction you're going. I think if you get caught up too much in the like the weeds of it and the small scenes, if you don't know where you're going, even if it's one great scene, but I know. You're like, there's nothing holding this book together except this one scene. Read that scene, you will love it. Right, yeah. It's gold. But when you can have a direction for your story, I think is it's going to be the most profitable in the long run versus time. It's like a time versus profit ratio. Exactly. So it's like, how much time are you spending with this? And is it worth it for you? I know, because sometimes it can be cathartic ironing out like one sentence, but then you're like, okay, I have to do this like 15 million times. Yeah. Maybe I should just plow through first. Before I'm 90. Yeah. Have you ever thought about writing scripts or screenplays? Not until I moved out to LA. Yeah. Because I'm from South Carolina, I know, and then I moved here, and I'll go to the library, and it's like, this whole section about how to write screenplays. I'm like, I'm definitely in LA. Yeah. So I went to a high school, this is just coming back to me, I went to a high school festival, homeschool festival, when I was like 16 or something, and they had a 24-hour playwriting competition. Wow.
So they gave you a bunch of little prompts like, you have to include a bag, and you have to include these 3 phrases, and you have to include this setting, and you would draw from a hat to get all these things. And then they set the timer for 24 hours. Basically, there were a lot of other things going on. So I was also in a song competition. I was also going to this and doing this. So in the midst of it, I have my laptop out and I'm writing this, play. I've never done something like that before. So it was very growing, but it was so difficult. I was like, I never want to do this again. But basically, I actually did end up winning. So
congratulations.
I love that I said no, and I was like, oh wait, actually I did, and I won. I repressed that memory. Yeah, so I did enjoy it. It was very different because, of course, you're not like describing the scenes necessarily. When I'm reading my book, I'm also kind of like seeing it in movie form in my head, and like what kinds of shots I would do, how I would set it up, whatever. So it sounds fun. I don't know if I would, but like I don't know. I see my book as a movie, so maybe I should try it sometime.
Yeah, I think you should. I agree. It is very different.
Yeah.
I think one of the downsides with the script is it's not a completed thing. Mm-hmm. So with a novel, you write it and it's done. It's in a book. And it's on the bookshelf and it's done.
With a script.
With a script, it's never...
You still have to execute it.
You still have to execute it, yeah. And sometimes that takes years to do.
Yeah, and then you might have a team, right? And they might be like, nah, I don't want to do that. And you're like, no, it's my baby.
Yeah, exactly. So it sometimes it's a trade-off. You know, I think and then some people will like write a book first and then they do a screenplay afterwards. Yeah. You know, and they base their screenplay off the book and do their own screenplay, and you know, that is also an option as well.
That's super neat. Yeah. When I was younger, I actually, with my friends, we would like make little movies and stuff, and I would write all the scripts for that. And then I had a YouTube channel, and I would make review videos for companies and stuff. So I wrote all the scripts for that, and I wrote the voiceovers and did the voiceovers for that. So actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I was like, wait, maybe I did. I just didn't know it. I was like, this is just fun. So yeah. Yeah, you
do really good voices, I have to say.
Thank you.
Yes, it's always fun to hear you do voices.
Oh my gosh. I didn't even know my capability. Apparently I have a lot of different voices.
Yeah, it's really funny just hearing you imitate other people, and you're like, oh my God, I said this, I don't know. Like,
and my office mates are always like, they said it how, and then I'll like redo the little like thing I'd done, and they're like, really? I have a voice for like every guy in our office. It's like varying levels of like height and
yes. But they all got this little bit of sass to it, and it's all very
everyone in my mind is a little sassy.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like you would be a good actress too.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that means so much to me. I wanted to get into it when I was little. I was in a couple plays, and the first one I was so proud. I remember I had like one line, but I was the first person to speak, so I thought I was the main character because I was the first person to speak. And then I did a couple growing up, but my mom, which I get, my mom was like, you know, it's difficult to be in that sphere, and then there's a lot of, you know, like hierarchies, and you get this part because you know this person, and you know, she didn't really want to be a part of that, but it's kind of cool though, because even though I didn't pursue that necessarily because of my job and just other things I'm doing, I've just naturally gotten chances to act and I'm doing, you know, character voices for little kid shows, and I didn't expect to do that, but I love it so much. I mean, I'd actually like to make this book into an audiobook. I think that would be a fun project.
Yes.
I've been watching videos about it, so maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And you can do all the voices.
Yes. All the voices I want.
No, that's a great idea. I've actually heard recommended that you do audio, because a lot of people don't read as much as they used to, you know?
Yeah.
But people will listen.
In the car.
They'll listen on the car, or like at the gym, or wherever, and like they're much more inclined to listen to something than to.
I might try that.
To read, yeah.
It would be fun to have another thing in my pocket. I can put this on my resume. I'm like, I did one audiobook.
Yeah.
More I would love to do. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have any regrets, or maybe anything that you would have changed growing up? And it could be, you know, writing, storytelling, but even maybe personally, like things that maybe have affected your stories or affected your outlook on life.
Ooh, that's really good.
I know. That's just gonna lay that out on you.
Right, and I was like, all right, here you go. I mean, we all go through difficult things, and of course, right after I went through those things, I had a lot of regrets. And I was like, I should have done this, I shouldn't have done this, blah, blah, blah. But actually, because of it, it gave my story heart. Because like I told you, originally the story was just like, oh, a retelling of Rapunzel that's sci-fi. But then, you know, I wrote it back in 2017 and I had a lot of growing to do. So I went to a Christian camp, and a lot of the girls, I mean, they would tell me these terrible stories about the home lives that they came from. And I came from a great, you know, strong family. And so to hear these girls talking about this terrible abuses that they'd had, I was like, Adelaide has a voice now. Adelaide is all these little girls and their stories that they shared with me. So through them, I also realized, you know what, of course, sometimes in life you go through things and you wish you hadn't, but all those things that we go through, it makes us who we are. We are all characters. And the reason we love stories is because it's about people conquering something difficult. If there was no difficulty, if there was no regret, then they wouldn't have grown and there would be no story, and stories just wouldn't be a thing. So my mom used to tell me, she was like, if you're going through something, even if it's hard, just say, I'm a main character in a story. And, you know, I'm like going through this. And actually, I still do that to this day. I'm like, you know, it's just this, I guess this is the climax, and maybe the denouement is around the corner. I really do hope so. But I like to look at it with that lens. Like, you know, maybe we do have regrets, but, you know, it's going to help my writing. It's going to help me be not as much of a superficial person. Because when someone comes to me and says, hey, I'm going through this, I might actually be able to relate on a very intimate level. So, yeah, I hope it's hard, of course, but I think that's what it is to be a human, to be able to relate to other people because you've been through similar things.
Yeah. Well said. Wow.
So basically, I have no regrets ever.
Well, it's like you don't have regrets because you appreciated the hard times.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. So you appreciate the struggle.
Yes.
Because it builds you. It makes you a better person. It makes you stronger. It builds your character. It just makes you a better human being.
Oh, yeah, because, like, I'm a totally different person from when I was 15. I've been through nothing. Right. It's like, oh, everyone gets a happily ever after and everything's great. And I went through all these things, and people can just relate to me so much more now. So I wouldn't take it back for the world.
Oh, that's good. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really, really proud of you, Amanda.
Thank you.
It's a really, I don't know, it's a very mature outlook to have, and, you know, you're pretty young, so you're still pretty young.
I'm just an old soul.
Old soul, exactly.
Someone told me, they're like, you're like a 60-year-old woman in a 20-year-old body. I was like, thank you. I'll take that.
I've been working on it.
Yeah, I
know. But no, I think it's good because it matures you. I think a lot of, especially like with, you know, I'd say we're pretty close in the same generation, but like a lot of people our age, people are like so frivolous. You know, they're so frivolous, and they don't take things seriously. Everything's a game. They don't want to work hard. They just want to like post TikTok videos, and and it's just like, what are you doing? Exactly. You know.
Exactly, and that's why we're all so superficial, right? Yeah. And it's just it's not fulfilling.
Yeah, and it's not real. That's the part that bothers me the most. And it's not authentic. And when you have characters that are doing that same thing, the characters aren't authentic because they're having the same sort of perspective as people in our generation that are not being real people. They're just, everything's fake and superficial. And
and I'm wondering, I can't even start with the stuff that's on Netflix right now. Like, and I've been watching I love watching movie commentaries, which people don't get, but I love watching them. And a lot of people are like, why are Netflix things so crappy right now? And maybe it's what you're saying, where people, we are their audience. And so they're like, well, they care about superficial things, so let's make superficial TV shows because that's what they're making, so we should make that too. But a lot of us are actually calling it out because we're like, no, this isn't a story. Yeah. There's no heart to it. I don't want to watch this for an hour. Yeah. So, yeah, hopefully it comes around. I'm tired of it.
Yeah. Well, I think you're doing a good job of making the world a better place with your stories. Yeah. Cool. Do you have any other final thoughts before we kind of wrap up, or anything you need to get off your chest that you need to say?
I actually really have needed to just say this for a while.
To the world.
I know, right? Not really. I mean, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to do the podcast. Just because I feel like talking about writing, it's kind of re-inspired me because I've been working on this book for like so long, and now that I don't have it anymore, I'm like, oh my goodness, now I have to start my next book, and it's kind of scary. I'm starting to kind of jump back into the writing world of, writing index cards with like scenes and looking up what a 3-part act structure is and all this stuff. So I love the writing world and I love everything in it, and so I'm hoping that I can jump back into it and inspire your audience too as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like kind of like riding a bike. Like once you've done it, you learn it, it'll come back. Yeah. And the best advice I heard is just to write. I was interviewing a girl a couple weeks ago, and she was just talking about how she, during the pandemic, she wrote a book. Wrote a script every month.
Every month?
Every month, yeah. Wow. And like they weren't all great scripts, but she did it every month. And I think something like that's so powerful and encouraging, because you just got to do it. You just got to put in the time. You got to put in the work. And like if you, whatever thing you want to do, that whatever you want to be good at,
yes,
it's going to take hours to do it, and you just have to decide it, because it's something that's worth the time and the effort to be good at it.
And is it worth looking at some of these scripts and being like I wrote that? But like my graphic design teacher said, you can't expect to be a monk doing calligraphy when he's been doing it 50 years and you've done it for 2 days.
Right.
So it takes time.
Yeah. But we have all the time in the world. Right?
I know.
Well, not all the time. But like,
just need another pandemic to have like a month to write a script. No thanks.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. I really, really appreciate having you on.
Absolutely.
And it's just you're very fun, insightful.
I try.
And I love hearing your perspective on things.
Thank you.
And you've always been really encouraging, and you just have a very light, welcoming
girl next door.
Exactly.
And all the Gen Z terms. Cottagecore, girl next door.
Exactly. But anyway, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you guys for watching and listening, and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys next time.